Since Season 3 of Invincible came to a close last month, I've been wanting to go through each episode rapid fire while giving my general thoughts. At least that was my initial plan, but I now have things to expand on since posting my previous video a couple of months ago. First off, I will not apologize for anything I said in that video because some of y'all are unhinged if you're willing to sift through a 50-minute long animation with a fine-tooth comb. First episode of Season 3 comes out, and people immediately start complaining about the fact that a minor background character is just a race swap of Debbie's character model. A background character with 0 speaking lines who shows up for all of 5 seconds. Who cares? Man, I can't believe they turned a portion of the Season 2 Viltrumite fight into a slideshow. A professional studio would never do something like that. Oh wait. Studio Bones did the exact same thing during the Lemillion overhaul fight from MHA. Is Studio Bones also incompetent, or are they also forced to make creative decisions in order to meet deadlines? At least in Invincible, the frames are progressively sped up to look more interesting. What? There was a minor coloring error for one entire frame in Episode 3? A popular anime from a big studio would never make a design mistake like that. Oh wait. It actually happens fairly frequently, and sometimes it's very apparent. I can't believe that the corner of Mark's shoulder moves out of frame for an entire second during a mostly inconsequential dialogue scene. Terrible, awful, lazy, That's you. That's what you sound like. Also, since posting that video, I've gone back and rewatched Season 1, and there are more instances of the PNG dragging that everyone hates in that first season than there are throughout almost all of Seasons 2 and 3 combined, so I still have no fucking clue what people are talking about when they say that Season 2 was so much worse. Season 2 is at least the same quality of animation, just minus a little bit of compositing. I haven't been able to find a source to confirm this, but according to a couple other videos I've watched, apparently Season 1 was in production for 3 years, while the second season was only given 2, which, if true, means you have absolutely nothing to complain about. Secondly, there seem to have been a couple misconceptions from my previous video that I'd like to address here. Just because I'm not a professional animator doesn't mean I can't critique things. As I explicitly state in my video, I'm not an animator either. That didn't stop me from making my own YouTube video on the subject. I'm not saying you're not allowed to have an opinion. What I am saying is that if you aren't well educated on a particular subject, then you should at least make an effort to learn a little bit about it before broadcasting your hot take to potentially tens of thousands of people. Don't just say things into a mic like Joe Rogan. You're better than that. There were also a few people who seemed to be under the impression that being hypercritical of an animated show somehow makes them a smart consumer, so allow me to spell it out for you. There is a difference between being critical of the products you consume and singling out a couple seconds of a 50-minute long episode because it makes you feel good. Duh, it's just a PNG getting dragged across the screen. Wow, you're so clever, you're so witty. Did you come up with that joke yourself? I'm not trying to argue that the animation is always perfect, but when you disingenuously claim that the entire show amounts to a bunch of PNGs, you're discrediting all of the work and passion that did go into the animation. Also, saying Amazon is greedy is like saying the sky is blue. If they can deliver a product faster and at a lower cost without losing subscribers, they will. If you really want to push back against corporatism, your time would be much better spent petitioning for labor laws instead of being annoying for online clout. Or just unsubscribe from Prime Video if some extra lighting effects matter that much to you. Your call. By the way, some of the local animators who worked on Seasons 2 and 3 also worked alongside Studio Mir. So no, there is no competency issue at play here. If you think a studio responsible for one of Amazon's biggest titles is just going to hire anyone off the street, you are very naive. Lastly, I did concede in my pinned comment that simply hiring more revisionists would have maybe led to Invincible looking more polished, but after giving it more thought, I'm not sure how true that is. The more members you add to your team, the more difficult it becomes to get everyone pulling in the same direction. A smaller team is sometimes better, so I'd say the bigger factor here is time. And it's important to factor in things like the various strikes that have been going on since 2022, which would have also cut into whatever time the animation team was given for seasons 2 and 3. Regardless, let's say the animation quality was impacted by budget constraints. I'd say one possibility is that Amazon looked at the budget for Vox Machina, seeing as it's their second most popular animated show on Prime, and went, yeah, that should cover it, without factoring in that Invincible's runtime per season is significantly longer. Meanwhile, as people have pointed out, the rest of the budget would have gone towards all the A-list actors doing the voices. Normally I'd take issue with voice roles being given to live-action actors instead of professional voice actors, but I gotta say, the voices have been consistently good. Steven Yeun knocks it out of the park with his performance, especially when voicing all the different Mark variants during episode 7, and the rest of the cast was clearly given good direction as well, so I'm willing to let it slide. Just this once. Additionally, since people like to compare the quality of Castlevania to Invincible due to Castlevania having a yearly release schedule, here's the list of main, secondary, and background characters for the 4 seasons of Castlevania, and here's the list of characters for the 3 seasons of Invincible. More character and environment designs means more work. Just thought I'd point that out. Oh, and before people try to accuse me of being a fake fan, I own the first 2 physical volumes of the comics. I also enjoy the illustrations, and am quite influenced by the style myself. I follow Ryan Oatley on Instagram, and you should too. However, comparing full comic illustrations to animation frames is dumb, and I shouldn't have to explain why. While we're on the topic, of course it's going to be easier for a fan to add compositing effects to an already finished animation because nothing needs to be made from scratch. The majority of the work is already done, while compositing is the icing on the cake. Don't get me wrong, fan-made collabs tend to be pretty impressive, but slapping things together with no time constraints and staying within a schedule in a high-pressure studio environment are 2 very, very different things. Okay, I think that's enough of a prelude. Let's actually talk about Season 3. Right off the bat, we're treated to another PNG dragging moment. Oh no! But in my opinion, if there's any place in which to do it, it's here during a scene between 2 characters with a vast size difference. Explain to me how one is supposed to make a regular-sized dude punching another dude the size of a mountain off the ground look convincing when it defies all laws of physics. It's just a quick scene meant to set up Mark's training montage, and I honestly don't know how else it could have been shot. Moving on. Look at how pretty this iceberg is. Look at it. I love when background artists have the time for more painterly stuff. Shortly after, we're introduced to the time-traveling brothers, as well as a 3D background that doesn't appear to be timed quite correctly, followed by some pretty solid choreography. Mark proceeds to have a justifiable crash out against Multipole, which I don't think I can show here in full without YouTube getting mad at me. And oh look, Kate's still alive. And she's made the Immortal her bitch. Neat. Next scene. Oliver is a big boy now, and Ray somehow survived having every part of her skeleton crushed thanks to top-secret government science. Mark attempts to flirt with Eve and makes things awkward as he always does. Good job, Mark. Then it's the return of Doc Seismic. He did look a lot cooler in Season 1 when he was using his bracelets to fly around, but he's now enlisted the help of some giant centipedes off Craigslist. Similar to Mountain Man, I really don't know how one is supposed to make giant centipedes move in a convincing way, so overall, given the complexity of this scene and all the different elements going on, I'd say it looks fine. Although it is frustrating to see Mark lose to a bunch of bugs, seeing as we were just told that he's twice as strong now as he was in Season 2, but I know, comic book logic, just gotta let it go. Then Goody Two-Shoes Mark gets mad at Cecil, which brings us to Episode 2. We get to see some of Cecil's backstory, and check out the detail on this animation sequence. I can tell this would have taken a long time to animate correctly, because we can see like 3 different layers of skin as it slowly melts away. All the while, the animators are still able to maintain a look of horror on Cecil's face. Really solid stuff. We then get even more cool animation. Scenes with a simple or non-existent background is a godsend for animators because it means they can let loose and focus solely on the subjects, and it really shows here. A blank white background allows everything to stand out more, so of course they're going to take the opportunity to focus on details. Plus, we finally get to see some of Season 3 Mark's potential, seeing as he struggled against just 3 of these guys back in Season 1. This bit of a Reaniman's fist crumpling up against Mark's shoulder feels really satisfying. Also, the Reaniman designs seem a lot like an homage to Evangelion. It's not just me, right? As the cherry on top, this fight sequence is finished off with a bit of anime Sakuga flair. Again, good stuff. Uh-oh, turns out Cecil downloaded a Nickelback album into Mark's brain when he wasn't looking, and it's really f***ing up his day. Fast forward to Guardians HQ, and Mark has yet another justifiable crash out against the Reanimen. Once that's over, he threatens Cecil for being a dick, and deciding they can't trust him either in light of current events, most of the Guardians of the Globe choose to quit. Also, Mark and Eve are officially a couple now, yay! Episode 3 opens with a very melodramatic sequence following a criminal duo, who appear to be the same guys hired by Machine Head back in Season 1. We see them doing crime due to financial struggles, while also trying to set themselves on the right path, etc., and because of the emotional music playing throughout the whole thing, I really thought it would end with one or both of them dying, but they just get knocked out by Mark and Oliver, so this whole sequence felt unnecessary, if I'm being honest. I get that it's supposed to remind us that criminals are people too, with their own problems, which does relate to the overall theme of the episode, but it seemed to be building to its own climax that never came, so it just felt weirdly out of place. Anyways, Oliver gets chastised for using his powers, Eve starts attending college, the teen team moves back into their old headquarters, and Ray and Rex bond over their shitty childhoods. And similar sounding names. Mark agrees to let Oliver tag along for some superheroing, but not before he chooses a costume with some unfortunate connotations. Also, Mark is blue now. And Debbie dips her toes back into the dating scene with some guy whose name I've already forgotten because he doesn't matter. Look, I know Debbie deserves some screen time too after having her entire life uprooted by Nolan's betrayal, but come on, this is boring. Let's get back to the action. Mark and Oliver take on the Muller twins, but Mark is forced to leave Oliver to his own devices as he flies into the stratosphere to... Wait, he's not really going to... Did he just collide head-on with a nuke? And all it did was knock him out for a few seconds? I'd say the power scaling in this show distracts me a lot more than the animation ever has. Meanwhile, Oliver has a heated gamer moment and absolutely obliterates the twins, which showcases some impressive anatomical knowledge that I sadly also can't really show because gore. Mark then has a somewhat justified crash out towards Oliver, and the two of them have a conversation about ethics. Also, I think this jump landing that Mark does is neat. That's some good animation right there. I noticed some people expressing how tired they were of the killing is always bad trope by this point, but if you ask me, it makes a lot of narrative sense. Oliver is still young and impressionable and hasn't been on Earth for very long. Because of that, Mark is deathly afraid that he's going to go down the same path as his father. Regardless of what the Muller twins did, it's important to Mark that Oliver learns the weight behind his actions. Because if he doesn't develop a more nuanced moral compass, there's not much stopping him from taking the lives of other people who don't necessarily deserve it. The episode ends with Mark learning that his family is being spied on. Ooh, who could it be, lurking in the shadows? Episode 4 features Mark getting abducted by those time travelers from earlier so that he can save the future from an ominous, nondescript threat. We also get a setup to a joke that won't pay off until later. We eventually learn that the authoritarian monster ruling the world through fear is none other than the Immortal. He hints at some mad spoilers regarding future events before revealing that he enslaved the world's population for the sole purpose of getting Mark's attention. The Immortal has outlived everyone he's ever held dear, and Mark is the only one strong enough to grant him his wish of death. Which I find very hard to believe considering just how many times we've seen the Immortal get his ass handed to him up to this point, but whatever. Ross Marquand delivers a really good broken old man voice here, and it's scenes like this that make it obvious just how much the comics are relied on for color choices. The greenish-brown palette of the Immortal's throne room really adds to the eeriness of his and Mark's encounter. Immortal continually eggs him on until Mark is forced into doing the deed, at which point Dropkick and Fightmaster bring him back to his own time period. But not before we receive the punchline to a really good time travel joke. Having been rudely interrupted, Mark continues his date with Eve where they left off, and they get in some bonding time. Meanwhile, in Viltrumite prison, Alan attempts to convince a melancholic Nolan to join the Resistance. But Nolan, having betrayed both his Viltrumite honor and family back on Earth, is convinced that he deserves nothing more than death. Sounds like somebody's got a case of the Mondays. Alan says, nah, f*** that, and starts a jailbreak. Amidst the chaos, Alan comes across a very serious-looking prison cell and decides to free whatever is contained within. Inside is Battle Beast, another familiar face from Season 1, and he's very eager to spill some Viltrumite blood because Battle Beast is, well, he's just built different. This is an instance where I think some extra mood lighting would have been nice, seeing as this is Battle Beast's real introduction, but again, it looks fine as is. By no means is it a deal breaker. Alan and Mr. Beast quite literally crash Nolan's execution ceremony just in the nick of time. Deciding all he needs is some extra motivation, Alan plays possum until Nolan is forced to come to the aid of his new one-eyed pal. Adjacent to this, Battle Beast is doing what Battle Beast does best, and the gang eventually decides to take the fight outside, at which point we're treated to a brutal head-splitting combo. Absolutely savage. Battle Beast is too engaged in his fight to adhere to the buddy system, so Alan and Nolan lose track of him in the vast emptiness of space. But I have a funny feeling this isn't the last we'll be seeing of him. Nolan takes this moment to reveal to Alan, and by extension to us the audience, that the Viltrum Empire has a bit of a population problem. Apparently there are less than 50 pure-blooded Viltrumites left in the known universe, which ironically makes them an endangered species. Sounds like the Resistance stands a good chance after all. Huzzah! I'd say episode 5 of season 3 was the first episode of Invincible that ever looked noticeably off to me. As much as I enjoyed Mark and Oliver's sibling moment of playing footsie under the table during breakfast, I found some of the faces throughout this episode to be distracting, some of the backgrounds were rather flat, and then there's the issues I had with the dragon fight. But before addressing that, I'd like to soften the blow a little by saying that all the scenes with Multipol were quite good. It's legitimately cool to see some Shadow Clone Jutsu with more grounded choreography behind it. And whatever problems this episode had were probably a result of the staff being too busy animating this. I can tell the animators had fun with Multipol's parkour-like fighting style, which was definitely the highlight of episode 5. The other saving grace being that Machine Head makes another lengthy appearance. He's such an asshole. I love all of his dialogue in his goofy synthesized voice.
Backstab me again and I'm gonna drown you in your kid's blood while I tear off your wife's skin and eat her heart. And I don't even eat meat, so that's saying a lot. Comprende? That guy, watch out. Smarter than you think, even for someone who's 50% rock. All right, who's ready to make a little money?
Okay, onto the courtyard sequence with the big lizard. The fight against Leo wasn't all bad. For example, this is some good composition. This is a good composition. This is also really good composition. Overall, the fight had a lot of potential behind it, but it felt very rushed. It starts off strong with Mark giving Leo a body check from the side with some solid weight behind it, and Leo immediately counters by cleanly swatting him out of the sky with his tail, which is amusing. But it's then followed up with this. As said, it looks rushed. Mark and Eve's tag team felt a bit corny, and sections of it even seem to be missing a few frames. We have Mark interacting with debris that still has a background texture on it, and then comes the final blow, which was rather underwhelming. I think it would have looked a lot less flat had they chosen anything other than a profile and front-on view. I probably would have started with an upshot of Mark heading down with Liu in the frame, and then maybe have the camera follow Mark as he rams into Liu's head. Something along those lines would have made the impact look a lot more dramatic, even without extra compositing. There, see how I actually explained the issues I had with this scene and how to potentially fix some of them instead of just parroting words like janky and mid? If you are looking for some new words to use, I would recommend cracking open a thesaurus. This is more of a personal gripe, but I also didn't like how Mark's first instinct at the start was to swoop in and start throwing some weak-ass Looney Tune punches. That's the sort of thing Season 1 Mark would do out of inexperience, but we're talking about Blue Suit Mark here. I think Season 3 Mark can struggle against an opponent while still looking a little more intimidating. So overall, a pretty meh episode, but with some redeeming qualities. Also, things of significance, Oliver makes some human friends, Rex and Ray are basically dating now, Multipole escapes prison, and Machine Head is back in the game. Next, we have the Jesse Pinkman episode.
This isn't about me! This is about the thousands of people murdered and the countless other lives destroyed! Why is above the law? Why does never pay for his crimes? He can't keep getting away with it! He won't.
I don't have a whole lot to say about episode 6 because I don't feel Powerplex adds very much to the plot. We already know that Mark is traumatized by the sheer amount of death that occurred during his fight with his father, so having a character that embodies that seems redundant. Not to mention the end of this episode was very predictable. It was painfully clear that Scott's quest for closure was going to get his family killed sooner or later. Revenge only leads to self-destruction and all that. But hey, I enjoy pretty much anything with Aaron Paul in it. Does anyone remember The Path? That was a decent show that didn't get much attention. I think it was cancelled after, 3 seasons? Regardless of how you feel about the fight scenes, one thing that sets Invincible apart from other animated shows to me are the nuanced expressions and body language of the characters. From a subtle eyebrow raise during dinner to dramatically pacing around out of grief, the character acting in Invincible is enjoyable, and I'd say episode 6 utilizes it well. I also really liked the mood lighting at the start of this episode in the parking garage. Showing Scott's angry expression as the woman rolls up her window was a nice touch as well. The backgrounds have clearly recovered since episode 5, and the detail is back on par with season 1's backgrounds, if not even better. The one gripe I had, however, was the decision to make Powerplex's electric blast yellow instead of bluish-white like it is in the comics. I get that the yellow matches the rest of his character palette, but yellow electricity just looks so cheap and cartoony to me. Makes me feel like I'm watching Pokemon. A little more detail in the lightning would have been nice, but again, not a huge deal. Also, Monster Girl gets her magic belt that prevents her from de-aging, along with a convoluted explanation as to how it works, even though it doesn't matter because comics. Next. The Invincible War of Episode 7 gave us some very good action, such as the first confrontation between Mark and Mohawk. Mark gets tossed around a bit, as usual, and then check out the camera work for this sequence. We zoom in on Mark before both characters rotate in space. They collide with one another. Then the background starts moving in reverse as Mohawk tackles Mark to the ground, all in one consecutive shot. Oh, and prior to this, Rex runs off to join the war effort. But nothing bad will happen, and he'll come back home safe, I'm sure. Side note, I liked the yellow tinge to most of the backgrounds this episode as all the smoke blots out the sun. Superhero guy does a cool flip, and then we're introduced to the single most important character of Season 3, Business Baby. I'm not joking, that's literally his name, and he's dead. Alright. Mark and Eve give one of the variants in almost JJK level jumping, and then we get to see two of the Marks engage in some banter, which is always fun. And I love how f***ing fast Eve's force field is moving here. Eve is then quickly downgraded from MVP to liability, and Cecil jumps in to save the day. Crackhead Mark was possibly my favorite part of Episode 7. The way he repeatedly stops mid-fight to make sadistic quips makes him feel like an evil Spider-Man on stimulants. Shortly after this scene, we arrive at Rexplode's final fight and subsequent death as he self-destructs like a champ. While we do have the Golden Gate Bridge here for scale, I still think the explosion could have been a bit bigger to make it more convincing that a Viltrumite just got vaporized. If there's one instance where a flashy explosion would be appropriate, I think it'd be one involving a main character death. But there is a hard cut to some emotional music, which I suppose drives the mood home well enough. Then we're teased with a brief look at Tech Jacket. And look, Powerplex finally got to kill Mark. I'm happy for him. Lastly, Angstrom makes his entrance, as he was the one who brought the variants to OG Mark's timeline. The variants attempt to turn on him, and in retaliation, Angstrom traps them all in the same wasteland from Season 2, which makes the Marks a little bit mad. It's a good thing none of these Marks had quicker reflexes, huh? Speaking of reflexes, OG Mark knows how to dodge now. I really like the amount of foreshortening used during the Angstrom fight. Good movement and shot choices throughout. Mark eventually gets a hold of pesky Mr. Levy, and Oliver shows up to remind him that sometimes violence is the answer. Do it. Do it now. Mark gets ready to commit the M-word, but his initial hesitation gives Angstrom yet another chance to escape. Well, most of him, anyways. Back in Angstrom's alien dimension, the technicians are rather cross with him for not upholding his end of their deal, so they coerce him into servitude.
Refuse, and your remains will gift us endless fascination.
We have such sights to show you.
To finish things off, Mark meets Eve's parents under less than desirable circumstances. The Immortal hangs up his metaphorical cape after taking one too many L's, and Cecil makes one last attempt to re-establish a connection with Mark, which he appears to turn down. This leads us to the finale we've all been waiting for, the rematch between Glenn and Negan. I was initially turned off by hearing Jeffrey Morgan's voice coming out of Conquest's mouth, as I expected him to sound a lot deeper, but as episode 8 progressed, the voice grew on me. His fake laugh could use some work, but the gravel in Morgan's voice fits Conquest's personality pretty well, and the nonchalant way in which he delivers the most grotesque lines is similarly fitting. As for the highly anticipated episode itself, I really have no notes. I thoroughly enjoyed it from beginning to end. Any portions of this season that felt lacking in quality were likely sacrificed for the sake of the Conquest fight, and guess what? They delivered. This time, they've used a 3D background for the sake of some complicated perspective. We have a nice panning shot upwards before Mark gets his shit rocked again. I also love the decision to have soot from building debris float down like snow as Mark begins to regain consciousness. There's plenty of good moments, but I think we can all safely agree that these few seconds of animation right here is the best Invincible has ever looked. And yes, that includes Season 1. It's right up there with the Adam Eve movie climax. I also like this bit where the camera becomes disorienting as Mark desperately tries to gain his bearings. Shortly after this, Oliver joins the fray and gets his soul slapped out of him, as well as a free spine adjustment. Conquest shows off how much of a tank he is by stopping Mark's tackle in midair, and we're then treated to a repeat of the infamous subway scene, except this time it's outdoors. After yet another horrific display, Eve shows up, much to the concern of Mark.
Get away from him, you animal! Get away from her, you bitch!
Eve puts on a flashy performance, but unfortunately, she's not the one the show is named after. As Eve quickly dies in his arms, I found it really significant that Mark calls out for Cecil here. After everything that's happened between them, it's only in his most desperate moment that Mark realizes just how much he relied on him for support. Maybe not the emotional kind, but medical support for sure. Eve kinda sorta dies, Mark and Conquest have a clash of wills, and Mark gets pretty messed up in the process. We then get Conquest's haunting speech about loneliness, which I believe was an entirely new addition from the original writer that wasn't present in the comics. Eve turns out to be not so dead after all and hits Conquest with a Kamehameha wave, leaving Mark to finish the job. Fueled by nothing but blind rage and adrenaline, he does just that, in a very brutal fashion. Mark then takes a well-earned nap, Thanks for the help, Cecil. Great timing, Cecil. He wakes up at the Pentagon 3 days later and confirms that Conquest is really dead. Which turns out he isn't actually, because Cecil is a stinky, dumb idiot who somehow pushes his luck more than a gambling addict. And some other stuff happens, and that's the end of Season 3. In summary, similar to previous seasons, I think the animation this season looks fine, if not very good where it needs to, and y'all are being a bunch of Debbie Downers about it. If I sounded angry at any point in this video, it's because I am. You managed to piss me off, and I didn't even work on the show. Congratulations.